Hello YouTube and welcome to my review of Amazing Spider-Man number 12, Volume 7. We're going to get into spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled, here's your warning. Let's take a look at the creative team. We have writer Joe Kelly and guest artist Ed McGuinness. Issue 12 kicks off with J. Jonah interviewing Hermes Crenshaw, whom we last saw in issue 7 as he was following Hellgate. Crenshaw is claiming that Hellgate punched Spider-Man so hard that he sent him to another dimension, and Jonah isn't buying it. We then cut to Norman out in New York City taking care of crime as Spider-Man, and his inner monologue reveals that he thought being Spider-Man would be easier, but it's far from that, trying to balance Spidey's life with Peter's life and often leaving his loved ones disappointed due to the responsibility of being Spider-Man. We also see a small panel of Aunt May with her new boyfriend looking worried in the panel. We then cut to Ben Reilly at Peter's job. Ben and Brian are working on their latest project, and Brian has started to get suspicious of Ben. Ben leaves Brian hanging with what I can only assume was a special handshake that Brian and Peter had as kids. We then cut to outside of a New York City courtroom, and we see Roderick Kingsley, aka the Hobgoblin, has just won his court case against Norman Osborn. Norman was trying to shut down Kingsley's operation legally. Kingsley leans in to tell Norman he's lost his edge since he's lost his pointy hat. Norman replies, asking Kingsley was he the one trying to kill him, and Kingsley replies, it wasn't him. We then see a hooded person standing across the street and recording the conversation. We then see Norman, like Peter, taking his frustration out on New York City and web-slinging to clear his head after the courtroom defeat. Norman's inner monologue kicks in again, and he wonders if Peter has ever turned his frustration into action. Norman wants to track down the Hobgoblin's lair, but he gets interrupted by Miles and some of the other Spider heroes. They want to know who he is. Silk confirms that Spider-Man is still alive, and they know he's off-world, all courtesy of the Web of Life. Norman is relieved to hear that Peter is still alive. The Spider team insists that Norman stand down as Spidey, and they get into a fight. In the battle, Norman begins to have some flashbacks and remembers how he dealt with Harry as a kid, using fear to parent him. And finally, when Norman sees and touches Spider-Gwen, the flood of guilt comes back over him. He stops fighting and reveals himself. Spider-Boy has no idea who he is, but the rest do. Norman explains that Peter trusted him, and he's only trying to do the right thing while he's gone. We then cut to Kingsley and some additional hooded figures that we saw a few pages ago. Kingsley has built them a robot, and the hooded figures state, with the right pilot, Norman will finally pay for his crimes. And that's where this issue ends. Overall, not too bad. My biggest complaint here is that we have an Amazing Spider-Man book and there's no Spider-Man Peter Parker in it. Other than some story breadcrumbs along the way, we didn't get much in this issue. We learned that Hellgate could have punched Peter into space or another dimension. Norman realizes the weight of being Spider-Man and that Kingsley is working with someone to try to take down Norman. Ed McGuinness's artwork is very good. Doesn't miss a beat. He's a very good Spider-Man artist. Just a very good artist overall. And it appears that Joe Kelly's writing style is going to kind of flip-flop between, in this storyline at least, between Earth and space, every other issue. So I'm hoping that next issue will get more of Peter's side of the story, what's going on with him. So it seems like Joe Kelly's writing style is just kind of leaving these little breadcrumbs along the way within the story, kind of giving you small little updates of what's going on to help kind of move the story forward instead of giving you kind of a big reveal all at once. So it's definitely a story that's growing on me. It has been a little slow paced for me. I'd like to get to know a little bit more, a little bit quicker in the story. But overall, I'm going to go ahead and give this issue 2.5 web heads out of 5. Just kind of right in the middle. Not great, but not bad. Still interested in seeing what's happening with Peter and, how we're going to resolve all of these different story items. We've got the Norman angle. We've got the Ben Reilly angle. I do like the fact that Ben Reilly is trying to do something good here. He's trying to fill in for Peter and, kind of maybe make himself whole. Maybe is that kind of the storyline that we're going for? And I've heard somebody else mention that maybe Brian Nearing, Peter's friend, could be, maybe turning into a villain at some point. Maybe this experiment that they're working on goes wrong. He's been experimenting with mushrooms. I'm not sure. I didn't feel that way. I did hear somebody else mention that and thought maybe there's a possibility. I hope they don't go that way. I think Brian has been a good kind of friend, comic relief piece in this storyline. So I hope they don't go full villain on that, but only time will tell. But that's what I got for you. So leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this story, of the artwork, the writing, if you're reading this. And if not, what did you think of the review? Always love to hear from you what you think of, the overall review that I'm doing. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next video. If you didn't know, I'm also an indie comic book creator. Please follow my project's updates at ecscomics.com or on Instagram at ecs_comics, and that's comics with an X. I have successfully crowdfunded 2 books on Kickstarter, The Doctor #1 and The Doctor #2. The Doctor Issue 3 is currently in progress, and you can follow the pre-launch page on Kickstarter now, as well as an art book project called Damsels of Halloween and Horror, which will be launching in September and features several comic book community artists. I'm also in the process of writing a new sci-fi story that will be coming soon. So please give ECS Comics a follow and get updates as they happen.